So my name is Kyle Bollinger, and I've studied land use effects on the urban heat islands in Maricopa County. Um, so I guess the first question would be, what are urban heat islands? So this is a warming effect caused by anything that's man-made, essentially. It was discovered quite a while ago, but essentially it's where downtown areas seem to have more latent heat, especially into the night or the next day, and rural areas don't seem to see this effect. Um, so it's the study of that aspect of the urban heat island that is interesting to me, and also because of the desert environment I'm about to talk about, there's not a lot of vegetation as well, so we'll get to see how that affects our desert environment in some cases. So how does land use affect the urban heat island? So as I mentioned, vegetation has almost a negative effect in some case if you're measuring it against a urban developed area. So essentially, the more development, the more built structures especially, increases the temperature of the surrounding area. Farming and water actually, depending on what rotation the crop is in, could actually lower the temperature effect compared to like nearby dirt in some cases. And vegetation is sort of a natural way that the ground is, or the heat of an area is regulated. And so I wanted to study this effect within Maricopa County. So Maricopa County is the fourth most populous county as of now, over 131 miles of roadway, and that'll be important later. And because roadway is essentially one of the leading causes of the urban heat island effect, due to its typically asphalt's a darker surface and that retains more heat, especially into the night and sometimes the next day in some cases. And our current planning, it doesn't, at a county level, Maricopa County does not account for the urban heat island effect. So typically it's done by cities, if at all. So that's sort of the problem space. And so land use is a way that we could either estimate or maybe tie this effect to certain areas spatially. So essentially, a land use, land cover study was done. It was classified with urban and developed, desert and vegetation, grass and crop. And you could see over 5 years, there's pretty big spatial change. So this is both if maybe a dirt area or a grassy area becomes desert, or vice versa as well. So you can kind of see on the outside of the county, there's quite a bit going on. You can actually see where the Rio River is. So you can kind of see it start to, especially in 2020, as the farmlands move outwards from the city. You can see here that it's the farming starts to grow along that river, and you can see those pixels changing. So how can these temperatures be measured? So I use a technique called land surface temperature, and essentially that uses satellite raster data to calculate the ground temperature at any given pixel on the ground. So it's imperfect, but it does allow you to take a large snapshot of an area. So in this case, Maricopa County's pretty large spatially. And so at any given time, you can kind of take a big snapshot of the area and do some different analysis, right? So it's imperfect because the resolution can be a little bigger than you might want, but it does allow you to see changes over time. And whether not each of those values are super precise, you can at least see the difference between the values and how they shift from day to day, year to year. And it allows you to do a couple of things. So sorry, I'm just going to So it'll basically any developed area or any area that's about to be developed, you can take one of these snapshots, and that allows you to actually kind of see how it's affected the area and how it might affect the urban heat island. So just by temperature alone. So next I wanted to talk about that third thing as far as what affects the urban heat island, that's vegetation. So this is actually a just NDVI between 2015 and 2020. And what this shows is actually there's a greening effect happening in some of the upper left part here of Maricopa County. You can see the farming becomes very obvious at this point because you can see this sort of changeover by season. So you can kind of see how, oh, did they plant their crops this year, or did they harvest or leave it bare? And you can actually see the vegetation or crop in this case change and switch over. So, and you could do this year by year and see. So within 5 years, these are all the changes that were made in the crops. But also you can see a lot of within the metro area. There's quite a bit of red and not a lot of green. So this could be for a lot of reasons. Maybe people aren't watering their lawns as much, or they're changing their lawns to desert landscaping. But that all sort of contributes to this urbanization and built environment that creates more of the urban heat island effect. And you can see here in the Tonto National Forest, there was a large area that was where vegetation was reduced. So that might be something worth looking into, especially because of the large scale. But you can kind of see here that there was also greening, so it was almost balanced out in a way. So next, I wanted to take these values of these LST values and essentially do some analysis. So first up, I wanted to compare. So I put all these pixels into something called census tracts. And what that gives us is allows us to use other variables collected within those census tracts. So in this case, the rate of poverty. So here you can see there definitely does seem to be a sort of a belt of both effects happening. But overall, it does seem to kind of be not super correlated together. But if you were a decision maker or even a citizen within that area, and you saw that there's a high mean LST, meaning high heated surface in your area, and along with poverty, there might be some people at risk in that area. So you might want to focus efforts or resources there. And as well as you can kind of see that the Sonoran Desert area in the bottom left here does have a higher, hotter land surface temperature. And then as you get into this forested area, it quite a bit more reduced as far as the heat within that area, the mean LST in this case. So, and that's the mean width over the entire geography, right? So, all right. So lastly here, I wanted to show this hotspot analysis. So what this shows essentially is there a significant amount of either hot or cold in that area. So low mean LST would be blue, high mean LST would be red. And so you can see here instantly there's where the forests is, which, as I mentioned before, definitely has an effect on reducing that mean LST, while the Sonoran Desert has a heating effect. And if you've heard of desertification or anything like that, essentially more heat or desert climates creates a heating effect in its own year after year as well. So you get these hot spots on the map. So that those become apparent. And so that's if you ignore the sort of populated center here, but there's actually, if you're looking inward, you can see that farming in Buckeye has increased, and which actually has a cooling effect. And along the Gila River here, it's much cooler. And that's because typically water has a cooling effect, especially at night. It's almost like the opposite of an urban heat island in some cases. And then there's some pockets of heat here. You can see in Mesa, in West Phoenix along the I-17, and actually on the north side of the mountain in Avondale as well. You can see this, there's some pockets of heating that might be because the environment's being overbuilt. Maybe it's because people are converting maybe a large, low residential area to maybe a larger industrial area, or with a parking lot essentially with apartments. So that will create a heating effect compared to a grassland. So you see a lot of that happening within these areas as well. And then you can see there's a few pockets where there's actually cooling effects. And typically you can see it's kind of on the north side of the mountain in some cases. And just being on the north side of the mountain can rescue you from some of the heat in this area as well. Yeah, and then obviously in Tempe, there's also this nice cooling effect. So, so just wrapping up. So I think that these costs of the heated environment have already been studied. So I wanted essentially to create a way to have, well, anybody from a citizen up to a decision maker or people making zoning rules or policy to consider these effects. And anybody who lives in those hot spots will essentially have increased cooling costs for air conditioning. It will decrease their quality of life in those high mean LST areas. Farms and vegetation, as you probably can see from those last slides, are key for keeping that mean LST lower. Poverty doesn't appear to coincide, but it does. It's important for us to focus on those areas that might have people at risk. And I think local studies, one of the issues with this is it's very high level, but allows you to sort of take a snapshot at any given time. So I think local studies could be done at a higher resolution, such as Tempe City's Tempe Urban Forestry Master Plan. So that was an effort to green some areas, which makes them cooler. And as you could see, Tempe, especially in the main area of Tempe, has a nice cooling effect. So it does seem like that their forestry master plan has had some effect. And higher density areas do not have an increase in LST compared to medium density suburban areas, but that's probably because of the resolution of the study, which is the pixels are 30 by 30 meters. So a higher resolution where you can determine something as someone's backyard or driveway more finely, that'll allow probably that difference to become more evident in the future studies. So that's it. Thank you. I think we have a question and answer time.